Welcome to the initial podcast of the American Tribune. We're calling this Freedom from the Press. My name's Jason Robertson. I'm joined by my co-host,
Todd Peterson. Welcome, everybody. Live viewers, we see the numbers ticking up. Good to see you. And if you watch the recording, great to see you later on in the day or later in the week.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks, folks. So a little bit of background of what the project we're working on and what we're going to try to do with this is Todd and I both were normal guys. We had normal jobs, normal lives, wife and kids. And we felt something was fundamentally wrong in the country. Just too many things were going to hell. If it was the economy or the debt or what the government overreach was doing. And you always kind of felt something was wrong. And President Trump comes down the escalator and he exposes all of this stuff that was wrong. And all those things that you felt in your bones that just wasn't right about the country, all of a sudden we start seeing it in real time, from weaponization of government to government corruption to the military industrial complex. And so we both left our normal guy jobs to start doing content creation at the American Tribune. We've got multiple websites, americantribune.com, where we cover kind of our basic fun stories, Jason Aldean, that kind of thing. And then we have americantribune.news. And americantribune.news is more of, it's our Substack where we do deep dives into government corruption, Jeffrey Epstein, how people are demolishing the educational system. And we welcome and thank you guys for joining us on this journey. Todd, would you like to give any more context, kind of what we're doing?
Yeah, it's been a really incredible journey, Jason. You alluded to the fact that we were just kind of normal people plugged into the matrix here. We got a job, we raised a family. I still have some little ones at home here who, sidebar, are not going to go to the government school system. So that's been a conversation at home here with the wife. But it gets to a point that you just can't support it anymore. You realize that you are doing the work of these evil Marxists. I worked in the public education system for my entire adult career. And it just got to the point where I can't support a lot of these missions, a lot of the ideologies. It just gets to be too much. And you go to work every day feeling like I'm doing something evil. And what can I do about it? And the answer for me was teaming up with Jason here and trying to get the word out, get the message out, and do something every day that's not going to contribute to the decline of the country.
It's funny, too, because everybody watching this show or listening, they always say, what can you do? And for guys like us, we changed our entire life. We gave up our jobs and careers. We both had great jobs and careers to do this. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody has that luxury. But here's one easy thing you can do. You can like, you can comment, you can share. If you like, comment, and share our content, you can support us through stars or different programs through the various platforms. And that helps fuel us to go out and create content and do things to help educate the public. Now, to dovetail into freedom from the press, why do we call our podcast Freedom from the Press? So you have the normal people. I call them normies. Whether you voted for President Trump or President Biden, the people on your block are normies. And we're just working class stiffs that want to raise our families and have nice roads and schools and have nice things. We might have different political beliefs, but the media is the enabler of the power pyramid. So all those elitists try to get you and me and other patriots to fight each other. And so a lot of what we dig into is narrative and stories they don't talk about. And yesterday we saw one of the most terrifying things to our country. And half the country is appalled. If you support President Trump, you're absolutely appalled by what happened with this set of indictments over the election. And if you're the Democrat side, you've been programmed the opposite, where you're like, this is great. Donald Trump is like a threat to democracy. And thank goodness he's doing that. So we're going to start by showing the clip from yesterday from Trump's lawyers.
All right, let's pull it up here.
The fact that I am standing here for the third time in 5 months is not a coincidence. This is the Biden political lawfare that we have seen time and time again. It is a deflection from everything that they have done. And if you don't believe me, look at the facts. On March 17th, Hunter accidentally admits that it was his laptop from hell. The next day, DA Alvin Bragg indicts President Trump. June 8th, an FBI document is released showing that the Ukrainians paid the Biden crime family millions and millions of dollars. The next day, the Mar-a-Lago raid and the Mar-a-Lago indictment. Last week, Hunter Biden's sweetheart plea deal fell through when the judge realized it had blanket immunity. The following day, a superseding indictment against Donald Trump. July 31st, Devin Archer goes to testify in front of the House. That was only after they failed to put him in jail prior to the fact.
All right, let's pause it there, Jason. There's a lot to unpack there here. So Trump's lawyer here really presents a timeline. And I know you want to make a separate comment here, but the thing that jumps out to me when she's going through these pieces is the timeline between something that happens against the regime and then something that happens against Donald Trump. And if you look at some of the dates here, we won't play the whole video here, but if you think about just exactly what is happening, I want to pull up a timeline here of just a couple of events. Let's go back to March 17th, for example. That's the day that we finally get an admission from Hunter Biden himself that the laptop itself is real. Again, that laptop from the 2020 election in October when the New York Post broke that story. Subsequently, the media blackballed that one. The very next day on March 18th, we get some initial Trump indictment news. Fast forward to June. On June 8th, the FBI document alleging that the Bidens took bribes from Ukraine. The very next day, again, June 9th, Trump gets indicted. The same thing happens in July here, at the end of the July 26th. The Hunter plea deal collapses that the lawyer was just referencing. On the very next day, the 27th, Trump gets indicted again. And then last week, we have the Devin Archer testimony. And again, the very following day, August 1st, Trump gets indicted for the latest January 6th episode. It's very clear what's going on.
You know, it's funny you say that. And the point is the regime couldn't get away with that without the media being complicit. So if you think of the timing, Congress is out of session and political news is going to be dead for the next 4 to 6 weeks. And what was all the news cycle going to be? This exposure about Hunter Biden and Devin Archer's testimony and the corruption and how it ties back to Joe Biden. And they've got everything on Joe Biden up to him just physically taking the money. Like they still need to get that last step. The Department of Justice isn't going to investigate it. And we should all be digging into, like, that should be what Americans are talking about. But instead, they're looking at these charges. And if you look at these charges overall, Alvin Bragg has essentially filed 37 felony counts for a paperwork error, which is hysterical. Because if you bring it up to somebody on the left that doesn't follow and you say, yeah, you know, they're going after Trump for the Stormy Daniels things. And the people on the left have been programmed by CNN and MSNBC. They'll say, well, Trump shouldn't have paid a stripper or to sleep with him. Well, that's not illegal. Hush money's not illegal. Well, he shouldn't have used his campaign money. Well, they're actually charging him with a felony because he didn't use campaign money, not that he did. And they just don't understand the facts. And so the Biden regime is going to try to keep President Trump from running for office for essentially what amounts to a paperwork error, where they're saying instead of the money coming out of his private money, it should have come out of the campaign money. It's ridiculous. And then you go into the next set of charges about the classified documents, and you just compare, contrast, like, where's the Joe Biden investigation? Where's the press conference? Todd, have you seen any mention at all about the Joe Biden classified documents investigation?
Do you mean the initial day that we got the story and then it disappeared forever down the memory hole?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, you don't hear anything about it. And sometimes whataboutism gets a bad rap here, but it's certainly applicable in this case. So how is it that, and you talk about people on the left or people that voted for Biden or the normies that don't really follow the news cycle and they think, okay, Trump did something wrong. If he committed a crime, he should be charged with that and then face the legal consequences. But it gets a lot deeper than that. Ask anyone, why Donald Trump? Why is it that Donald Trump is such a focus of the regime to get on every single possible count, even ones like Bragg that brought up that really are not crimes at all, but they can put it down on paper and make him go through the court system, really just to make him an example of, if you speak out against the regime, this will happen to you. But it gets a lot deeper than just the whataboutism, too. If you ask, why isn't Joe Biden getting the same level of scrutiny? Why isn't Hunter Biden, the Biden crime syndicate? You have to ask people at a certain point, why is this okay? Why are you still supporting, even if you didn't vote for Trump in either election, why are you okay that this is happening now? This goes so much deeper than just one man getting held accountable for alleged crimes. This gets into the fact that you are losing your country as we speak when you allow the political persecution of an opponent.
You know, and people say the whataboutism, like, oh, it doesn't matter, nobody's above the law, that kind of thing. But if the average American understood, like, the first set of charges, essentially a paperwork error, the classified documents, you know, it turns out Joe Biden had documents in like 12 different locations spread all over his house, in his garage, in the Biden Penn Center, which, oh, by the way, paid for by the Communist Party of China. And the FBI didn't raid, they didn't search, they didn't go through any of that. At some point, you just need to wake up and say, how is this acceptable? Or why are people not concerned that the sitting president of the United States has worse crimes, from what we've seen just with documents, than the Republican candidate? But yet the Republican candidate's the only one we hear about in the news. And it was funny because when Todd and I were talking about how to frame this up, we said, let's go back to when you were first exposed to what fake news was. And when you really could see what it was. And for both of us, I think we talk about Charlottesville, right, Todd?
Absolutely. And it wasn't that long ago that the Charlottesville narrative first came to light. What was that, 6 short years ago? It feels like a political lifetime ago that we were introduced to the level of apathy and hatred towards facts and then towards Donald Trump and the Republican Party here. So let's cue that up. And if you're watching live, we are going to have some quick transitions here. So as you're watching here, just excuse some of the
and white supremacists on the same moral plane.
I'm not putting anybody on a moral plane. What I'm saying is this. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is another side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, or you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
Both sides, sir. You said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Nazis started this. They showed up in Charlottesville. They showed up in Charlottesville to protest.
Excuse me. They didn't put themselves down as you. And you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
All right. Do we remember that last 3-second clip? I think we've all seen that 1,000 times on CNN, MSNBC. Very fine people.
Yeah, it's funny, and this is the crux when we talk about we need to break the mainstream media and we need freedom from the press. Because Todd, play the rest of the clip.
You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
Robert E. Lee are not the same.
Well, no, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
Okay, so we saw the first clip. How many people saw the second clip?
Right. You know, and this is kind of the crux of what we're getting to. So President Trump is making a great point. Are we going to take down statues? Are we going to destroy our history? Are we going to... how much of America are we going to destroy? And President Trump says a line about the fine people. Less than 60 seconds later, he clarifies No, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists. And that shouldn't even need to be said in today's society. There is nobody that thinks that's okay. There's nobody supports that. President Trump clearly says that's not the thing. But Todd, where does the media take it from there?
Well, and let's get to the media clips. We have Anderson Cooper, we have Chris Matthews coming in just a second here, but it is worth pointing out too, just from, and I'm going to point to my sign here, facts and logic, they hate it. If Donald Trump truly believed that the Unite the Right side was only full of neo-Nazis and white supremacists, by that statement, he would be saying that the other side, Antifa and those goons, also had fine people. I don't think anyone in this space believes that Donald Trump believes that all of Antifa are fine people. So just thinking through that statement alone, it doesn't stand to merit. If there's fine people on both sides, Donald Trump is acknowledging the basic reality. And again, let's go back to the initial conversation about normies that might vote for Biden that don't follow along. There are people on both sides that feel a certain way, but they didn't rise to the level of violence and hatred that we saw play out on that day. He was very clearly explaining that there were people passionate about keeping statues up, not rewriting history, not changing our culture. But that point didn't get made here. So let's pull up Anderson Cooper and see how he covered this.
Good evening. We learned today it doesn't take much to bait President Trump even to doing something self-destructive, such as revisiting one of the all-time low points of his presidency. We also learned today that the president continues to believe, against all the evidence, that there were very fine people on both sides at the alt-right neo-Nazi white supremacist Unite the Right rally that took place in Charlottesville, Virginia 2 summers ago. The president claims it was a rally about Confederate statues. It's not really what it was about, and yes, the Nazis and white supremacists were using the symbol of Confederate statues, but it was billed as a Unite the Right rally. And on the first night, white nationalists and neo-Nazis by the hundreds marched with torches and hate in their hearts and in their words. Later that weekend, one of them used his car to fatally ram a counter-protester named Heather Heyer and injure more than a dozen other people. So before we go any further, before getting into the president's latest defense of the indefensible, the idea that there were fine people there on both sides, I want to show you what this rally was about.
Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us!
They carried torches, a nod to the torchlight Nazi rallies of Adolf Hitler. They chanted, "Jews will not replace us." That was one slogan.
Unbelievable. So you hear President Trump's comments. For those who saw video coverage of what happened, there was absolutely neo-Nazis and white supremacists that were on site. There were also thousands of Americans that feel strongly that we shouldn't destroy America's history, that had nothing to do with these clowns. And on the left, you had Antifa that was screaming things like destroy America and take America down. Where's the coverage of that, Todd? Like, did you see Anderson Cooper breaking that down?
It doesn't exist. And the thing that Anderson Cooper is showing is something that we all agree on. So here's how the media divides this country over blatant lies. You and I are sitting right here, and we agree 100% with what Cooper is saying. If there are neo-Nazis and they are chanting all of those despicable things that they are right there, you're going to be hard-pressed to find any American that's on board with that. And if there are a handful, they are such a small minority as to not even be worthy of consideration. And so what they're doing is taking that moment, and then they're vilifying half of the country and vilifying Donald Trump, just openly lying about things that he said there, creating the division that is now so common in this country, when in fact we all agree that, as Donald Trump said, we're completely disregarding the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists because they should be condemned totally. You're not going to get a disagreement over that. And yet here he is using that clip to make sure that half of the country thinks that the other half is evil. Let's take a look at how that got reported by Chris Matthews over on MSNBC.
Once again, defending comments he made about the white supremacists and neo-Nazis who gathered in Charlottesville 2 years ago to protest the removal of that statue of Robert E. Lee. The president says his original statement about very fine people on both sides was answered perfectly. Let's watch.
Oh, I've answered that question, and if you look at what I said, you will see that that question was answered perfectly. And I was talking about people that went because they felt very strongly about the monument to Robert E. Lee, a great general, whether you like it or not. He was one of the great generals. I've spoken to many generals here, right at the White House, and many people thought of the generals, they think that he was maybe their favorite general. People were there protesting the taking down of the monument of Robert E. Lee. Everybody knows that.
Well, the people protesting.
I'm going to pause it right there. Donald Trump has a way with words sometimes, right or wrong, that's his style. He absolutely nailed it in the first press conference. There was no need for him to even address the question again. He condemned the white nationalists, the white supremacists, the neo-Nazis, and he pointed out the obvious reality that there were probably people swept up in a larger issue in the moment there. There were absolutely good people on both sides that they have their beliefs, they care about something passionately, they weren't there to incite violence, or they weren't there to hurt people, they wanted their voices heard, which is still a First Amendment right in this country.
Well, and it's funny because if you think of how Chris Matthews frames that, like he says something that is the exact opposite of what President Trump said, which he said he supported white nationalists. Donald Trump, we showed just a couple-minute clip, literally said, not the neo-Nazis, not the white supremacists, we condemn them fully. But every news media station, CNN, MSNBC, all these folks start spinning that narrative that Donald Trump's a racist. So if you bring that forward to today, and we're going to go through some more stuff, but just to frame it up, why is half the country excited that President Trump is going to be arrested and arraigned for these things? Because they've been conditioned for years to believe lies, and they want us fighting each other instead of looking at their corruption. And how does Joe Biden tie into the fine people hoax, Todd?
I'm going to shake my head here. Again, this was a couple years ago. Things get forgotten fast in politics, and it's likely a lot of people, especially on our side, might not even have heard this or seen this covered here. I'm going to let the video speak for itself here. I don't think we have to set it up any farther, but this is pretty amazing to watch now that we've seen how the media covered the Charlottesville hoax. And here's how Democrats have since used that.
Is home to the author of one of the great documents in human history. We know it by heart. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. We've heard it so often, it's almost a cliche, but it's who we are. We haven't always lived up to these ideals. Jefferson himself didn't, but we have never before walked away from them. Charlottesville is also home to a defining moment for this nation in the last few years. It was there on August of 2017 we saw Klansmen and white supremacists and neo-Nazis come out in the open. Their crazed faces, illuminated by torches, veins bulging and bearing the fangs of racism, chanting the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s. And they were met by a courageous group of Americans, and a violent clash ensued. And a brave young woman lost her life. And that's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it. And in that moment, I knew the threat to this nation was unlike any I had ever seen in my lifetime. I wrote at the time that we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. Well, that's even more true today. We are in the battle for the soul of this nation. I believe history will look back on 4 years of this president and all he embraces as an aberrant moment in time. But if we give Donald Trump 8 years in the White House, he will forever and fundamentally alter the character of this nation.
And let's recap. This is the presidential campaign launch video for Joe Biden. He began his presidency with this video propagating this lie.
You know, it's unbelievable if you think about it, where, you know, we just showed you back in the beginning, there was the protest. It was improperly covered. If you talked about it being improperly covered, it was You were a conspiracy theorist. You yourself got labeled a neo-Nazi or a white supremacist. President Trump condemned them. All the news media wraps around talking about that. And it became so prevalent that Joe Biden could release that video. And if we had an honest media, they would have come out the next day and said, this is a lie. President Trump didn't say, he did make that statement and he clarified he's not talking about neo-Nazis or white supremacists, the half of the country that you've been vilifying. Democrats, this is for you. They want you to hate us. And then they want us to in turn hate you so that you don't get distracted that guys like Joe Biden are the ones ruining this country. Joe Biden's the one that put us $32.5 trillion in debt and keeps running up the bills. He's the one that's trying to take away your civil liberties. That's what's happening. So, Todd, what do you think about the Biden?
And I wish I could attribute the source to this, but I think it perfectly captures the moment. So we think that side is wrong. They think our side is evil. And they believe that we're evil because of the lies pushed forward. And I would ask this question too, between the Cooper clip, the Matthews clip, and the Biden clip, is there any difference between the mainstream media and the Democrat political establishment? If you didn't know who those people were, you would think they were the same thing. They pushed the same exact lie. They had the exact same message. They had the exact same clips. It's really astounding. I don't know if anything makes it more obvious that the Democrats, or if you just want to say the regime, because there's plenty of Republicans Republicans that do the bidding of the same people. And then the mainstream media, it's astounding.
You know, it's funny that you bring up an interesting topic, because I think for those of us who are on the right, we like to demonize the left. And you know what? The average Democrat voter is not your enemy. You know, the Democrat establishment is, but you also have to acknowledge, and this is what makes President Trump so unique and probably the greatest gift he ever gave the American people, is we have a corrupt Republican establishment. And I know growing up, I grew up through the wars in the Middle East and all that nonsense, blood for oil. I had Republican values of like work hard and low taxes and less government. I had a hard time voting for Republicans because they would say one thing, they would do something else, and then they would send people to go die in the sands of the Middle East for oil and to make the military industrial complex rich. And, you know, you'd look at like campaign donations. It's like, oh, look, we just started another war. And the companies that made a bunch of money off that war, oh, they just gave money to Republicans. Like, that's great. And Democrats used to call that out. And I don't know about you, Todd, but like, I never defended that. I'm like, the Republican Party is hugely corrupt.
You know, I didn't defend it. I'm a little bit younger than you, too. I wonder if we have any younger listeners, in the millennial range, too. But I voted Republican in 2000, in 2004, and 2008. And being ignorant, but largely supportive of the effort. I mean, I bought into the mainstream narrative at the time that we had to go fight a war overseas in a different country with different religions and cultures because they were attacking our way of life. I mean, I bought it hook, line, and sinker. And this is what we did. I didn't necessarily I don't support war. I never supported war, but, I supported that at the time because, I was told to. I didn't do enough thinking on my own there, but I wasn't going to vote Democrat. And so if this was the way, this would be the way. Donald Trump really smashed that, and he broke through the military industrial complex, and he woke a lot of us up. And the Republican Party hates him so much, the Paul Ryans, the Rhinos, the Mitt Romneys, because he's taken away that good money. He called out foreign wars. He didn't get us involved in any other wars. He brought that train to a crashing halt. And I certainly will never look at the Republican Party the same way.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the ways we frame it up on another podcast I do is we talk, it's the uniparty. And if you think of it, most people watching or listening to the show have watched pro wrestling. And there was a time when I was young when people really thought Hulk Hogan and the Iron Sheik hated each other. They saw those guys battling, and, there were some people that had Hulk Hogan shirts, and there was a few that had Iron Sheik shirts, and you watch this fight. And then I remember when all of a sudden things started happening and the news started coming out, and you'd see these wrestlers that you thought hated each other getting arrested together, or being at the bar together and whatnot. And then you realize they were pretend fighting, and we were buying tickets, and we were buying shirts, and we were doing all this stuff. They were just extracting money from us. So the Republican Party, there was a time when they controlled the media and they controlled more, they had more governmental or institutional power before the Democrats took a lot of that over. So their narrative got spun. And Democrats saw it plain as day back 20, 30 years ago. They're like, Republicans are corrupt. They're ridiculous. Like they're trying to send us to wars we don't need to. Well, as the Democrats have taken over all these establishment things, all of a sudden it's reversed. And now Republicans have taken the role where they want weak Republicans that are going to do just good enough to lose. Because when are you going to give more money to the Republican Party? And I'm not talking President Trump. I'm talking Republicans like Ron DeSantis, like Mitt Romney, like Kevin McCarthy, like Lindsey Graham. They're going to give the most money to those people when you really see Democrats in power and when you see them really trying to destroy the country, which they are. But they're also going to, and you saw it on the midterms, we could have easily changed the spending habits of what we were doing to win some more Senate races and that kind of thing. I mean, if you look, the Republican establishment sent more money to Ron DeSantis than the 5 up in the air senatorial races combined. So take all 5 Senate races that we lost that didn't get us control of the Senate. They gave more money to Ron DeSantis from the Republican establishment than they did to those 5 Senate races. They're not serious about winning. They wanted it to be close enough so that they could hopefully keep the Democrats from doing anything too horrible. But are they going to raise more money in 2024 if they had control of the Senate? Probably not, because they would have stopped a lot of this horrible things happening. But now that everybody's all fired up and sees what Joe Biden's been doing, they're like, holy cow, we've got to let's support these candidates. And that's why they hate Trump. Trump is the one who exposed that. And Trump's not perfect. He's not a perfect man. He does many things I disagree with. And he's stuck in this difficult spot because he's got to work with these rhino establishment uniparty shills. But President Trump, he shut off the military industrial complex. Todd, how many wars did we have when President Trump was in office?
Give me a second. I got to think about that. I really have to rack my brain about how many troops he sent overseas. Let me get back to you.
Yeah, we'll have to do a deep dive on that. Let's see, Abraham Accords. He should have probably got a Nobel Peace Prize for the Abraham Accords, right?
Absolutely. Setting up peace between Israel and multiple Muslim countries, which they said was never going to be possible. And we could throw in moving the embassy over to Jerusalem, which they said would ignite, who knows, World War III at some point. It's a crime. Let's think back. You talk about Nobel Peace Prize. Barack Obama got a Nobel Peace Prize before even stepping into office and doing nothing and droning weddings and children. And then Donald Trump breaks this monumental historical peace among very, bellicose nations in the Middle East in crickets. Again, we could go on about the media hypocrisies all day, but Trump offers just so many examples of how corrupt this is.
Yeah, and then bringing it to present day, and Todd wrote a great piece on our Substack. You can find it at theamericantribune.news, where he was talking about, and it's going to be an ongoing series. And so we need to talk about this Hunter Biden thing while we kind of drop that against the President Trump indictments. So what have we learned over these past few weeks? And this is funny, and this is probably a point for us to make. We'll get called conspiracy theorists, so you say things like, do your own research, and people will make fun of you for that. Todd, when you write these pieces, how do you research them?
Well, I just dropped it in the comments too. So anyone here watching, check it out. Like Jason said, it's going to be a multiple part series. There's just too much to cover in one episode. So like we're doing in the podcast today, the first piece really just provides a little bit of history about how did we get here, what happened early on. It is pretty astounding, Jason. I think if we just want to lead off actually with Joe Biden, I think Joe Biden does a great job of setting things up for us, and then we'll kind of revisit your question there.
There we go.
This is perfect. We just watched his presidential campaign launch, talk about Charlottesville. So let's go back in time one more time here, and let's see what Joe Biden has to say about Ukraine. Well, we're getting a feed here. I think if you're watching, though, this is probably accurate for what Joe Biden has to say. I don't know if he's going to be any more lucid than this. Let's see if we can get this video to play, though.
We might run into a technical difficulty.
This is what happens in a live broadcast sometimes.
Kind of makes it exciting, to be honest.
You got to be on your toes here. This would be too easy otherwise.
Yeah.
Well, let me summarize the video here for us. I don't think we're going to get Joe to speak anytime soon, which is probably for the best anyways. So Joe Biden in this video, this is from 2018. He is talking about how he bribed the Ukrainian president and Burisma and private companies to fire a prosecutor that was digging into some uncomfortable things related to his Biden family schemes. We don't have the clip here today, too, or this is what the Substack starts to get into as well, but this is what Donald Trump was impeached over, for looking into what Joe Biden admits live on air. We got this, you can kind of see in the corner there. This is from C-SPAN. This is just the government promoting Joe Biden talking, and Joe Biden very freely talks about withholding foreign aid to the tune of $1 billion unless they fire this prosecutor who is going to really dig into what did Burisma pay Hunter Biden? Why did they hire Hunter Biden? So this is a little early on, and now this is what gets revealed finally in the U.S. Senate. We have more of that confirmation, so we're not tinfoil hatters over here, about just the kind of money that was changing hands and the Biden brand name that was so lucrative for Burisma at the time when they brought on Hunter Biden, who they admit is a dope and a loser, but they wanted access to his dad.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, because part of the project that we took on is, so when you try to do independent journalism or research things, like we're not journalists, we're yahoos from Minnesota who watch C-SPAN. And they try to frame you as this QAnon conspiracy theorist that's going to, like, goes on some message board to find some weird stuff. Like, no, we're literally dudes. Todd spends way too much time on C-SPAN watching congressional hearings. I spend time watching congressional hearings. When a Supreme Court decision comes down, I actually read the decision. When there's testimony, like the Devin Archer testimony, it was like 147 pages. I just read it. I don't need to hear what the media tells me or doesn't tell me. But so the project Todd's working on is we're connecting all these different data points. So you got the Twitter files that came out that talked about the government suppression. You got the Hunter Biden laptop story. You have the FBI whistleblowers. You have now the Department of Justice stuff. You've got 7 or 8 different data points, and these are all provided through congressional testimony, sworn under oath. And you start collating them, and you see this pattern developing, where in 2015, Devin Archer confirms they started this business with Hunter Biden, where they were trying to help foreign companies looking to get regulatory assistance, basically kind of like lobbyists in America. They were venture capitalists. That's kind of what they started. Like, hey, how do we get foreign governments want to pay for access to government officials? Let's start a business to do that. Why did they recruit Hunter Biden? Because his last name's Biden. Joe Biden at the time happened to be the vice president of the United States. Joe Biden, then there's all these meetings that happen. There's all these pieces that fall together. And the only thing we don't have is Joe Biden saying, yes, I will go fire that prosecutor in exchange for $20 million or whatever the number is. But what you do have is Joe Biden having lunch with them, exchanging messages with them, Joe Biden discussing with Hunter Biden what his business was. Like, this was clearly not an innocent bystander who knew nothing about what was going on with Burisma and whatnot. So then the Devin Archer testified, which is one of the most bombshell, which, by the way, check out, Tucker did a Devin Archer interview. I'm only halfway through the long form of it. But in that testimony, the Democrats then send out Dan Goldman, who was on there, who's now their dedicated Adam Schiff, who is when we need somebody to go out and lie on the media, it's Dan Goldman. And one of the questions he asked over the course of this 2 or 3 hour interview is, did you ever see, or was Joe Biden like directly connected with that? And Devin said, well, no, I didn't see him actually do that, or whatever the answer was. Like, but he did his first round, and he went lied to the media. But here's where the shift is happening, and why what we're doing and those watching, liking, commenting, sharing are doing is the truth's getting out. Because, Todd, when the actual press release, or when the actual transcript was released, how did CNN or CBS handle it? This is pretty
They
epic.
couldn't do the same hiding with Charlottesville. Let's take a look at how, CBS, like you said, not a friendly media to our side.
To rely on the characterization from Republicans and Democrats about Devon Archer's testimony, but now we can see the full transcript. You'll recall that Democrat Congressman Dan Goldman said that Archer testified that it was the illusion of access to Joe Biden that Hunter Biden was offering to these clients. But in fact, when you look at the transcript, what you see is that phrase illusion of access is in Dan Goldman's question. It's actually not what Devon Archer testified to. He says, yes, but that's not quite fair. This was about showing that there was the signal that there's influence and access here.
I'm just going to pause it right there for a second, too. So you think about it, it prompts a question, too, and then we'll kind of get back into what we're talking about here. But as an aside, are they setting up for Joe Biden to go down? You keep wondering every now and then something else leaks. I know they buried the classified document story. They're trying to bury Hunter Biden. He's going to get a sweet plea deal that would send you or I to prison for the rest of our lives. But the media is covering it now. So it does make you wonder why. What is the agenda? Because this is not an accident. As we showed with Charlottesville in Biden's campaign launch, like those videos were identical. They were all on the same page, but suddenly they're not. And so it does make me wonder, is Joe Biden likely running, likely not running in 2024? Are they going to finally push him out because he is such a liability now? But let's take a look at how CBS finishes this up.
Well, earlier this week, we just had to rely on the characterization from Republicans and Democrats about Devon Archer's testimony, but now...
Okay, we'll pause it there. Yeah, take it away, Jason. I took us on a tangent.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that was a perfect tangent, actually, because it brings up kind of multiple things. So the first question is, the truth is getting out about the Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, Burisma stuff. And now when they throw out their dedicated liars and they go to spin the narrative, the truth is coming out too strong. They can't put their finger in the dike. And actually, Peggy has the exact right response. We all know the truth. We need something to do about it. I'm waiting to start the popcorn. Peggy, here's why sharing this content is so important. Your friends, your neighbors, the people that go to your church or school that watch CNN, CBS, MSNBC, they are brainwashed by the press. And it's funny, a story I told on another podcast this week, my best friend, he voted for Joe Biden. He's a Democrat. He was a lifelong Democrat. We've known each other 20, 30 years. We've been on each other's weddings. We were best men at each other's weddings. It's okay to love a Democrat. Like, it's fine. This weekend we were working, we do rental houses is one of our projects. We were working on the thing together, and he looks at me and he goes, Jason, I got to ask you, because he always makes fun of me like I'm the conspiracy theorist and whatnot. And he's like, is this Hunter Biden laptop thing real? Is Hunter Biden really in trouble? I mean, this is a true story. My wife's standing there. She just laughs her ass off. And she's like, dude, where have you been for the last 5 years? Like, the laptop's real. Joe Biden was really on the take. Like, it's virtually proof. Like, you literally just need to see Joe Biden getting the deposit slip. The establishment Republican Party, though, Todd, what is the establishment Republican Party going to do about that?
Let me look into my magic 8-ball. Are they going to cover this fairly? Are they going to give Donald Trump a chance? Or is this an opportunity for them? We talk about Fox News. That's a separate conversation. I'd love to know if anyone on this broadcast feed watches Fox News, and if so, why? They've clearly established themselves as not a reliable source of information. I wish I could pull it up. There's a picture of Sean Hannity hugging Don Lemon, yucking it up at this DC ball. So like you said before in the wrestling, pretending to hate each other, in reality, chums. They're not on our side by any means, regardless of what network they work for. This is an opportunity for the Paul Ryan sharing Fox News to finally throw Trump under the bus as well, and maybe get a guy that they want. DeSantis does a great job as the governor of Florida. He has been outstanding in leading the way and pushing back against totalitarianism, whether it's culturally in the realm of the woke. During the last couple of years, he offered up more freedoms in the state of Florida than many other people got to experience. He has done a great job as governor, but he gets a lot of money and he gets a lot of support from the establishment. So it makes you wonder what's happened to his presidential campaign. So Will Fox News cover him fairly? Will the media, the conservative media, cover Trump fairly? Probably not. I think you and I know the answer to that question. I want to read a tweet, though, too, Jason, before we get going. I think we're going to move on from this point here.
Yeah.
You talked about we need a picture of Joe Biden taking a briefcase of cash before anything else happens. But this is Dan Bongino's tweet here. And again, former Fox News now, Tucker, Dan, these guys are bailing from the sinking ship. I think this is perfect, so I'm going to read it all here. So the Democrats are correct, he says, outside of bank records, suspicious activity reports, wire transfers, private bank transactions, LLCs, texts, emails, WhatsApp messages, photos of Joe and Hunter's business partners, voicemails to his son, 2 business partners saying Joe is the brand and the big guy and the chairman, and 2 whistleblowers' testimony, recorded phone calls between Biden and Poroshenko, video of Joe Biden bragging about firing the Ukrainian prosecutor, which we couldn't pull up, and Hunter's statements that he's giving his dad half of his income. Democrats are correct. There's no evidence of Joe Biden being involved.
I love that. And Babylon Bee nailed it like 2 weeks ago, where they ran an article where it was like a Ukrainian handing Joe Biden one of those big fake checks, and it said like bribe on it. And the article was Joe Biden accepts big check, but Democrats say there's no proof he cashed it. It was, but why do normal people, we call them the normies, why do they feel that way? Why do they let this stuff happen? And that's because they don't see the news. And if the average Democrat voter stood up to the Democrats and said, and understood, and you know what, Republicans, we can't be any more, like, we were complicit. You go back to 2014, 15, 16, you go back to the Bush years, we were where our Democrat friends are today, where our party was corrupt. You know what's going to happen, Peggy? Honestly, Kevin McCarthy's not going to do anything. He's going to talk about, we maybe send him a sternly worded letter. We might look at doing an inquiry. They don't want to do anything. Now, you take the Matt Gaetz, the Byron Donalds, the Wesley Hunts, the Eli Cranes. Think of those 20 people that didn't certify Kevin McCarthy for speaker. Those are the people. Those are our allies. Those are the people that really want to stand up for American citizens and know Kevin McCarthy's not gonna do anything. But it's important that, like, before we're too judgmental on the Democrats, they're where we were pre-Trump. And had we not had President Trump come down to expose how worthless the rhinos are, how worthless the establishment class is, we would be just as stupid as they are right now. And that's why I'm kind of excited on the Democrat side. And Todd, we haven't really talked about this, but what do you think of RFK Jr.?
So here we are in the conservative Facebook feed here. I think RFK makes a compelling presidential candidate. He is certainly saying the right things. I think the course of his lifetime, his actions might suggest too. So I think one of the big question marks for him is maybe his past with environmentalism. That remains to be seen on some of his beliefs around that topic. But boy, does RFK see right through the CIA and the intel community and the deep state. I mean, if anyone has inside experience and personal lived experience working with the regime, it's this guy. And I think if he were to come into the White House, he would make a very compelling president in dismantling that. And I do think, I know there's a lot of rumors on Twitter and social media. I don't see it happening, but I think a Trump-RFK partnership would be really fascinating. Brett Weinstein, who does the Dark Horse podcast, he made a compelling argument a couple years ago even. I think he might have been one of the first ones, just really talk about how the normies, you and I are fairly tinfoil hat radicalized these days here, but I think we both rely on our common sense. Are you looking for your tinfoil hat? All right, maybe you and I aren't the best example here, but most Americans, 90% of Americans, and I'll put myself in this camp too, we just want what's right for our families. We want what's right for ourselves, our personal freedoms. We want to raise our children in the country that, you know, our parents, ourselves. I think my generation might be the last that actually knew an America, the post-racial America, for example, before we entered this DEI insanity. These two would bring a coalition together of both left and right and really return, if we're talking, I don't know if the center really exists, but at least it's not going to be the AOC far left. And it's not going to be like the Rhino brand on the right. So those two together, if they could get their ideas across, and I'll include Vivek Ramaswamy as well. I think he's saying all the right things too, in terms of what an administration needs to return to set the tone for the country and the culture. But both of those guys are saying the right things. They're both calling out the deep state and the regime, and they're both doing it in their respective parties right now. But it would be really fascinating to watch them come together.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think RFK Jr., I think many of his policies are disastrous, and I would have a hard time supporting him.
He's still a Democrat. At the end of the day, you're still a Democrat. I mean, I don't know how you align yourself with that party in this day and age. So that's a big red flag.
But here's what I'm excited about. Well, two things. One, I think RFK Jr. should be part of the Trump presidency when he wins. And I think they should hire him as a special liaison in charge of blowing up the deep state. They killed your family. They've done horrible things to you. Your job is to help blow up the deep state. Make him the czar of the deep state. I think that would be phenomenal. But I think RFK Jr. more deeply presents this awakening that conservatives had or Republicans had with Trump, where they stand to have that opportunity with RFK Jr. Like right now, the media is calling him a conspiracy theorist about his stances and all that. And then you talk to Democrats who listen to him or see him speak, they're like, yeah, this guy's not crazy. This guy's pretty normal. Like
he's speaking to me. Yeah, he is. He might be the first Democrat in a long time to actually resonate with the same values that many Democrat voters have. Like if you vote Democrat and you're a normal person, you have nothing in common with that party. I mean, it is jaw-dropping to talk to family members and friends that vote Democrat that you know well. Like they're not insane. They're just regular people that want the same things for their family, for their kids, whatever. And you ask them like, what do you actually support in the Democrat Party right now? And they'll just stare at you. Like they actually can't say anything. They'll just go Trump.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny too, because if you look at the path the country's on, Social Security is set to be insolvent. Like we have to have a grown-up conversation about that. We've got way too much debt, like financial crisis. Like, why are we worrying about even abortion? Something as polarized as abortion? Let the states decide. That's all that the laws that have been passed, or Roe versus Wade, that's all they did. They said, send it to the states, let the states decide. And that's how the republic was established. But see, I think RFK Jr. will be a fascinating person to watch evolve, where if they actually host debates and he gets on the stage, and then when Democrats start seeing him get the Trump treatment, all of a sudden they're going to go, hey, wait a second. Like, this is all the same stuff they said about Trump, they did with Trump and whatnot. And I think it stands for a great awakening, because if we don't have the awakening of our friends, family, and neighbors, we're going to lose this country. And that's why I support President Trump. I think that's why Todd supports President Trump, because he really is in the breach. And the more they charge him, the more they attack him, the more you know you're supporting the right guy. If you feel the government's corrupt, you feel there's inherently something wrong, and you want to fight against that. Like you want to pick the guy that all those people hate. You're
always going to be over the target if you start taking flack. So Trump is saying the right things. RFK might be saying the right things too for his side.
Right. Well, hey, folks, this has been a super fun first episode. Thanks for the folks tuning in. We're streaming on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. We're going to drop it on Rumble here. We'll upload. Rumble's not the easiest platform to work with, so we'll have to upload it after the fact. We plan on doing these shows every Friday, and same time, 11 o'clock Central till 12 o'clock Central. If you have any thoughts, topics, drop them in the comments, send us a note. Once again, the website's theamericantribune.com and americantribune.news. AmericanTribune.com is more kind of fun stuff. We talk about Jason Aldean and cultural things, because honestly, big tech censors that stuff. You can't put that on a website. They'll shut your website down. So you have to put it behind things like Substack. So we appreciate our subscribers and our paid subscribers to Substack. So Todd, what do you got for last thoughts?
Last thoughts. Well, Jason, always a pleasure to talk to you, and a big shout out to everyone that watched the podcast today. This is going to be something, like Jason said, we do moving forward right now, every Friday right now, hopefully going to expand that in the future, but appreciate your viewership. Like, comment, share if you like what you heard. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you very much.
Signing off. Have a great weekend.